This is the Pikmin logo. It might not be the one you grew up with, but it's the current logo used for the entire Pikmin series. It's a clean logo, and as a graphic designer, its color, the placement of the flower, and the choice of typography make it a strong logo too. However, since the logo's reveal in 2022, a lot of people, from fans to newcomers, have mentioned that the new logo's missing something very important. Soul. This nebulous term is rightfully sighed at by designers, as quantifying and understanding what designs have soul is an inconsistent and subjective task. In this video, I want to take a look at the evolution of graphic design throughout the Pikmin series, from its logos to the UI, and explain why I think Nintendo made the right call to rebrand Pikmin despite something being lost because of it. The original Pikmin released in 2001, and since its sequel Pikmin 2 released only a few years later on the same console, it makes sense that the graphic design would stay fairly consistent between the two entries. Pikmin today is still seen as a relatively niche or weird game series, with its uncommon style of gameplay. But at the time of the original game's release, Nintendo really played into the weird, and it can be seen everywhere. Junji Mori, the original designer of the Pikmin characters, had said that he was inspired by the world of Tim Burton, so he wanted the designs to not just be cute, but also give a sense of eeriness, or some emotional weight. The Pikmin's weird poses with their blank stares were so important to the original Pikmin that they included them in the game's logo, peeking from behind and in front of the now iconic white flower letters. These letter forms, made from copy and pasted daisies, confirmed on the title screen to be the tops of the Pikmin's heads, standing in formation, are a very bold design decision. It made this logo feel homegrown, with a patchwork or collage quality. Beyond just the texture of the flowers, the shape of the typography itself was noticeably inconsistent. It's aiming to replicate a sans serif typeface, but the kerning, the design term for the space between the letters, is unusually wide between the I and K, but so much smaller between the P and I, and the baseline below the letters is shaky. Also, the pattern of dark green leaves, the darkest green the series would see in its logos, is used as a backdrop to help with the contrast, but their own busy texture makes the logo quite muddy as a whole. When they added onto this logo for Pikmin 2, they simply removed the Pikmin, added the number 2 made out of the magenta flowers of the purple and white Pikmin, and copied over an extra chunk of leaves behind it. These logos have a weird thing going on, where it feels like if you squint, the design actually becomes a lot clearer, probably as the textures of flowers and leaves blur, and the white letters become easier to read. At the time, the only place you would really see the logos of games was on their box art, where the scale would be large enough to appreciate the detail, and the key art of the game matched the eerie, weird vibe the original games had, especially with Pikmin 2's clay art aesthetic. But almost anywhere else, these logos struggled. The amount of detail meant that making merchandise with them was incredibly difficult, embroidering them was impossible, and printing them would lead to murky results. But at the time, merchandise wasn't nearly as big of a thing for Nintendo as it would become. The user interface, or UI, in these games had this incredibly unique style, almost like it was trying to look like this alien technology from Hocotate. In some instances, it almost looked Fruitiger era, with the bubbles, reflections, and abnormal color combinations. I will be the first to admit that some of these menus in Pikmin 1 and 2 are ugly. Lots of text and shapes are weirdly stretched, things are hard to read, shadows and highlights are plastered everywhere. But there is some charm here. It's also seen in the heads-up display, or HUD, where everything on screen is in this glassy, bubbly style. The time of day tracker at the top of the screen takes up a lot of space, but isn't obtrusive, and it's fun to watch the bubble of the sun cross the entire screen, making the passage of time obvious. The character portraits and circular health bars are also in the same style. Even the typeface used to track the number of Pikmin is made out of these glassy bubbles. This font is so charming. In my opinion, much of the soul people are missing nowadays come from this ugly feeling. There are things that don't seem right, that look like an accident, but feel especially at home within the Pikmin world. The menus and UI should feel strange because these alien creatures are equally strange. Despite its flaws, it still manages to be immersive to players, and it was absolutely memorable. So what changed between these original designs and what I call the Great Pikmin Rebrand of 2023? Well, Almost a decade later, Nintendo released Pikmin 3, a title that in retrospect really did this original vision and feeling of Pikmin's graphic style justice, while still modernizing some of its imperfections. The logo still followed the flower and leaf styles of the originals. This time, the color of the flowers in the 3 are this peachy orange color, which is strange as the flowers of the rock and winged Pikmin are purple in this game. In fact, there exists a version of the Pikmin 3 logo from its original reveal at E3 2012, where the flowers in the 3 are purple. The letters were considerably further apart, and the leaves were smaller, and maybe fewer? The choice of using coral-colored flowers instead always intrigued me, and Nintendo never gave an answer on this. I believe it's for a few reasons. First, the purple and green logo had this problem of feeling a bit too cool-toned, and the orange brought more warmth and contrast with the green leaves, Pikmin 3 having this whole sunset aesthetic. The orange flowers are somewhat seen in-game when a super spicy spray is used, but I doubt that's what they were going for. Either way, in the Pikmin 3 logo, the letters are much more meticulously designed. They clearly had a typeface that they were being careful to accurately reproduce or trace using these flowers. The baseline is fixed this time around, and the kerning between all the letters is consistent. They also made the green of the leaves noticeably lighter, which made the logo as a whole more colorful to match the game's realistic but vibrant style, but I think it lost some of the contrast between the flowers and leaves that the older logos had. I think that even though the design and attention to detail here is far better than the originals, the logo still ends up being hard on the eyes due to all of its detail. Although when paired with Pikmin 3's key art, which is full of its own vibrant bright greens, the logo looks at home, the leaves still serving as good contrast for the white text. In terms of UI, Pikmin 3 kept the classy style seen everywhere in Pikmin 1 and 2, especially in the heads-up display, which looks very similar to the previous games, with the exception of the minimap, which I'll get to later. The bubbles were made a bit more matte, almost looking like sea glass, to separate themselves from the background better. Pikmin 3 kept using a cleaned up version of the bubbly font, and many of the menus used it in combination with a simpler sans serif font which was easier to read. Also, much of the UI seemed to balance a mix of these glass bubbles with a modern and science fiction design style, notably in the SS Drake spaceship, where these octagonal boxes, light blue borders, and scan lines in the day count, but also in the minimap and Copilot menus where they use that blue color scheme and futuristic design, even including those Copilot glyphs, and having the whole menu be animated with spinning dials and globes. This half-familiar, half-new approach to the UI made Pikmin 3's graphic design feel especially varied, as it cleaned up many of the problems from the older games, yet added a whole other art style which wasn't really explored in Pikmin 1 and 2 as much. Between Pikmin 3 and 4, Nintendo experimented with both Pikmin spin-offs and the style of their logos. Hey Pikmin simplified the Pikmin text to be made out of what looks like grey chiseled rock, but kept the leafage behind, although switching the leaves out for clovers and brought back the red, blue and yellow Pikmin to add some color and life back. The bright yellow of the speech bubble "Hey" above has good contrast, and it tells a fun story where Olimar is behind the clover patch, yelling at the Pikmin who are playing within it to get back to work. Something I like to point out about this logo, as it will come up again later, is that the Pikmin gray text, despite being mostly flat, has an emboss effect on it. These are the darker shadows and light highlights you see on the edges of the letters to create the illusion that they are three-dimensional. This gives the logo a bit more depth, which is also helped by the drop shadow behind the text. Pikmin Bloom, on the other hand, went for an incredibly simple, modern logo, which is a smart choice for a mobile game trying to be a new entry point to the series. The Pikmin text here is a cooler turquoise tone, with the exception of the O's in Bloom, which have a sunset orange to yellow gradient to them. To the right of the final M, a small red Pikmin walks off the edge of the logo. I believe the logo is trying to reflect the gameplay of this game, as where the red Pikmin walks is leaving behind a trail of glowing flowers in its path. This all brings us back to Pikmin 4, the latest entry in the series, and when it was revealed in that 2022 Direct, the logo was a real shock. No longer was the Pikmin text made up of leaves and flowers. It was a simple green color, using the now familiar typeface introduced in Pikmin 3's logo. The green had a slight gradient to it. It was a bit brighter on the edges. And the P had one single white daisy flower within. When it comes to the 4, the Pikmin came running in to create the familiar flowery number, this time with even more vibrant leaves and yellow flowers that matched the Ice and Glow's Pikmin flower colors. The kerning was adjusted slightly too, bringing the P and the I closer together, and the K and M as well. In graphic design, when a straight line letter is next to one that is curved or angular, the word mark tends to feel more balanced if the kerning is tighter. Although I think Pikmin 4 box art was a slightly odd choice. Showing all the Pikmin is fair enough, as well as Ochi, and I understand wanting to show the house in the background, but the composition of the whole image is fairly messy, with there being something to look at every depth level, and it feels less dynamic than Pikmin 3's Wilderness. I don't really understand the box art style of having the Pikmin simply stand there looking at the camera, rather than having dynamic scenes depicted in the originals. The UI in Pikmin 4 feels like a full commitment to the blue sci-fi style that Pikmin 3 was experimenting with. The bubbly typefaces have been dropped completely, in favor of a wider one that feels more apt for a sci-fi story. Gone are the days of the glassy bubbles. All the UI and HUD elements share this sharp look with a blue color scheme and scanline textures to simulate a futuristic display. Menus are mostly composed of sharp rectangles with angular cuts, and the map is simplified and entirely monochrome again. The day and item trackers have been shrunken down to the top left corner with a metallic design to make them look like devices and upgrades. Objectively, plenty of good design decisions were made with this user interface. It's easier to read and much more accessible than previous entries, which is helped by the mission preview. HUD elements have been made a bit smaller and nearby elements have been grouped together more. The consistent style means that players get immersed easier, even when they have to open the menus. Despite this, the style was maybe simplified a little too much, as Pikmin's UI began looking more like a generic Nintendo sci-fi interface than a Pikmin game. The visual strangeness was carrying a lot of weight in the previous games. It made you feel small looking at a weird world you didn't quite understand, but the rough and funky designs sometimes became obstacles to the immersion of players. I personally like Pikmin 4's UI a great deal, even though it has less personality than previous entries. It made the game experience much more intuitive and immersive for me. After revealing and rolling out Pikmin 4's logo, Nintendo began doing something that felt strange. First, they updated the logo of Pikmin Bloom, using the new Pikmin text with the flower in the P. Then they re-released ports of Pikmin 1 and 2 for Switch, where they gave them new logos in the exact same style of Pikmin 4, retroactively adding the number 1 to the first game with white flowers. And soon after, they revisited the logo of Pikmin 3 Deluxe, updating it, a game that had already been on Switch for years at this point, rolling out a patch for people who already owned the game, and even printing a new version with a refreshed box art. It started to feel obsessive. Going back and changing a shipped product's logo is almost unheard of in games. Nintendo was making sure everyone knew that this was the logo for Pikmin going forward. In terms of box art, Pikmin 1 and 2s were weirdly simple, dropping the iconic artwork of the originals for very safe, almost corporate styles, with plain beige and green backgrounds and understated textures. Most troublingly, Pikmin 3 Deluxe's updated logo did not look great on its key art, as the contrast of green on the leafy green background was just not there. So Nintendo chose to add a white drop shadow around the entire logo, which many fans seem to agree looks noticeably worse than the original logo's seamless key art integration. Some fans felt like the old logos they grew up with were being taken away, replaced by something flat and modern. All this effort put into modernizing the Pikmin games, but what was it all for? Well, it all brings us back to merchandise. T-shirts, bags, keychains, hats. Nintendo has been going full throttle on the merch wagon for Pikmin, seemingly following in Kirby's footsteps. They want to position the series as a recognizable, cute mascot that can be found in many different places, leading people to discover the series and hopefully play the games, right? The flat design of the logo, even when the P and the flower on their own, work marvelously on merchandise. The flat style often applies to the Pikmin too. This logo has been so fantastic for this specific reason. It's allowed Nintendo designers to be more flexible in how it's used and what materials it can be printed on. So that just begs the question, which side is right? Fans calling the new logo soulless aren't wrong. When it comes to the games, much of the charming ugly that was present in the older games has been lost in the Switch ports. But the new designs are cleaner, right? And more practical. They are allowing Pikmin to grow as a brand and for us fans to purchase all this new merchandise. The UI has become more accessible and functional. The truth is, sometimes good design and soulful or expressive design can't always work together. Nintendo had backed themselves into a corner with the older Pikmin logos, and Pikmin 4 was just the game where they bit that bullet and fought for a fresh start. It simply goes to show that Nintendo isn't scared to go back, change the past a little and make changes if they think it's best for their series. It's slightly uncomfortable to think about. Thank you for watching. Hope you'll stick around.